Yes,
Let me ask my question. Let me finish the question. Is Donald Trump, as you say now, the best president of the 21st century, who you say you want as an advisor and a mentor if you become president? Or is Trump, as you've said in the past, in your books, on Twitter, a, quote, sore loser who is a, quote, danger to democracy and who did, quote, downright abhorrent and egregious things on January the 6th? Which one?
What's up, everybody? Jackson here. And this Mehdi Hasan interview with Vivek Ramaswamy is built around specific checkable claims about Vivek's own public record, his January 6th statements, an Atlantic magazine interview about federal agents and 9/11s, a 2020 tweet about mask mandates, and his actual voting history. I want to walk through each of these carefully because gotcha-style political interviews live or die on whether the underlying facts actually hold up. Stick with me, get that like in, get subscribed, because we check the record here. Now let's get into it.
Politics. Let's talk politics. We do. We want to talk lots of stuff.
Sure.
You're an advocate, your critics say, of fantasy politics, of magical thinking. They say you propose stuff that can't be done. For example, you said on Meet the Press the other week that if you had been in Mike Pence's place on January the 6th, you would have insisted on first passing a bill that night to bring in single-day voting on election day with paper ballots.
That's inaccurate.
Government-issued ID.
I never said that night. I never said that night.
You what you would have done on January the 6th, and you said I would have done this. And
I said what I would have done differently is that I was precise about the period between, and this is still ambitious, I will admit, but at least let's get my view correct. It is ambitious. Between November 4th and January 6th, I think it was an opportunity for heroism.
Just to be clear, you never said anything about
said it every step.
Let's play the clip. Guys, do we have the clip?
I've said this in countless forums.
Let's have a listen to the clip.
On your Chuck Todd splice script, in all of my written statements and everything I've said,
hold on, we're playing the clip right now.
In that period, between the election.
Here's what I would have said. We need single-day voting on Election Day. We need paper ballots, and we need government-issued ID matching the voter file. And if we achieve that, then we have achieved victory, and we should not have any further complaint about election integrity.
So what would you have done
through the Senate?
So what would you have done with Mike Pence? You would have not certified the election?
So in my capacity as president of the Senate, I would have led through that level of reform. Then on that condition, certified the election results, served it up to the president, President Trump, then to sign that into law. And on January 7th, declared the re-election campaign pursuant to a free and fair election.
Vivek, not only do you not mention anything about November, but let's say you did do November. That joint session was not a legislative session. The vice president doesn't have the power to introduce legislation. Neither party would have backed such a bill.
Oh, come on,
and it couldn't have been passed in a day.
The fact of the matter is,
naive stuff. The president,
the president and vice president absolutely drive legislation through Congress. That is exactly how things work.
Trump wasn't doing legislation.
Now,
he was busy pushing the big lie, as you pointed out yourself in your books.
Well,
so he wasn't there.
I wasn't
Mike
the vice president of the United States.
Passed a bill, but
I was not the vice president of the United States. You guys in the media, you guys in the MSNBC crack me up to sort of create a hypothetical situation to say, if you had been vice president, what would you have been doing? I'm telling you exactly what I've been doing, but you're saying, but that's not what Donald Trump was doing. This is a joke. Let's actually have a substantive conversation. Do you want to have a substantive conversation about what should have happened, or do you want to play a game of gotcha? Because you have the choice. The choice is yours. Do you actually want to have a substantive converation? If you do, I'm down to do it. Do you want a substantive conversation? What we need.
You said substantive full time.
Actually, if you want to get a word in, you know, if you're going to speak the truth and ask a legitimate question, have at it.
I think it is a legitimate question. Multiple people wondered about your knowledge of how Congress works, suggesting Mike Pence, by the way, on the debate stage asked you if you would have supported what he did. It's not an MSNBC question. It's a Republican vice president question.
Yes.
So fine, you don't want to answer
it. And what I'm saying is it was a missed opportunity for heroism, not in one day, but I think that in a period of 2 months. And I think you're a smart guy.
You understand this. There's an American confidence. You're a smart guy. It couldn't have been done in 2 months.
I think under extraordinary circumstances, in extraordinary times, we have an American Confidence in Elections Act. It's literally making its way through Congress now. ACE. I support it. I think if we had gotten that done during that window, further we said single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday.
And Mitch McConnell wouldn't have agreed to a national holiday.
I think Democrats should agree to it.
We can argue forever.
I think Democrats should agree to it.
That's a different argument.
That's what I stand for. I think we're still going to get that done when I'm the president.
Okay.
When I'm the president. Not in some fantasy land where I was vice president in some other year in the historical history.
Let's talk about you as president.
What I'm running for is what we're going to do.
Let me ask a question so we don't run out of time. Please don't filibuster. I just want to ask a question about when you're president, you said this is your words, quote, if you want to stay out of no-win wars and make America stronger at home, I know how to get that done. Genuine question, Vivek, not a gotcha. How? How do you know how to get that done? With respect, you've literally never done anything like that in your life. I could go out on the street outside the studio, grab someone. They have as much experience as you do of keeping us out of foreign wars. That's not an insult. That's just a statement of fact.
No, it's not an insult. It's a fact, right? And it is also a fact that everybody else who does have experience in the foreign policy establishment has been sending us into no-win wars for a long time. It's specific, and I'm glad we've finally gotten to the doorstep of actually discussing a policy agenda. Here's what I would do. Pull Russia apart in its military alliance with China. Those two countries are in a military treaty dating back to 2001. That is the single greatest threat that the United States faces. So I would end the Ukraine war on terms that, yes, allow Ukraine to at least come out with its sovereignty intact, which may not even be the track they're on right now. But in return, and also make a commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. In conjunction, and by the way, for people in the foreign policy establishment, they forgot that Gorbachev was made that promise by James Baker in the United States in 1990. So keep our word there. But in return, actually make a hard requirement that Vladimir Putin exit his military alliance with China and remove his Russian military presence from the West. That's the deal that I would do.
Again, the fantasy land is why would Putin just agree with you? Why? Because you asked nicely, Putin will hold his word. He'll pocket your concessions and not just carry on dealing with his biggest trading partner, China?
Well, here's the thing. I actually think that China shouldn't be his biggest trading partner. I think it's a mistake that we've closed off economic relations with Russia. I would lead both the United States and the West to reopen economic relations with Russia because Putin does not enjoy being Xi Jinping's little brother. Mehdi, you're a smart guy. Look at what he's done. He's actually sent weapons to both India and Vietnam right after the February 2022 meeting he had with Xi Jinping. There are cracks in that armor, but we need to actually open our eyes to see the opportunity staring us in the face.
We will have to agree to disagree whether we think that you can persuade Vladimir Putin to drop his alliance with Xi Jinping. You have made truth the centerpiece of your campaign. So let's talk about your trustworthiness.
Yes.
For example, when CNN quoted you talking to The Atlantic about 9/11 and federal agents possibly being on the planes, you said the quote is wrong, actually. But the quote wasn't wrong. The Atlantic released the audio of what you saying exactly what they said you said.
Hold on,
let me finish the question.
Let me be crystal clear.
Let me finish the question.
The Atlantic released the whole tape. They refused to do it.
You said on Twitter Spaces last month that no, you had never supported Bernie Sanders' mask for all legislation, but you literally put out a tweet in July of 2020 calling it a sensible idea. You also said not once but twice in June and July that the first time you'd ever voted was in 2020 for Trump, but in fact the first time you voted for president was in 2004 for a pro-choice libertarian candidate. How can people believe what you say?
So, Mehdi, let me just go through one by one. The Atlantic, yes, purposefully spliced an out-of-context quote where we have challenged them. They released the tapes. We asked them for the tapes first. They didn't give them to us. They waited then to splice them and release them publicly. I challenged the Atlantic to release that entire conversation. And what was a conversation about how many federal agents were in the field.
You said was wrong. We all heard it. We can play it if you like.
No,
it is exactly word for word what she quoted to you. You said they put words in your mouth.
Look, if you want... If you want hard facts, here are hard facts. That day, The Atlantic printed it. I said, that looks like something that never captured the character of our conversation. Can you ask Atlantic for the tapes? They said they would refuse to release the recording to us. So when Caitlin asked me about it, I said, that does not at all sound like the context of what I said. And then, it turns out The Atlantic releases a very, everybody should listen to it.
You're putting words in my mouth.
It functionally sends the wrong message, Mehdi.
Oh, functionally. Okay. You could have said it's out of context. You said the quote was wrong. It was so badly
taken out of context that it misled their audience. It was so badly taken out of context. It was basically a lie and it misled their audience. But ask the Atlantic to release it. So my view here is,
the lie is denying you said words that we all heard you say on tape.
Filters. Mehdi, if they are going to cut something before and after without the question of what the guy is that came beforehand, come on, why wouldn't the Atlantic? Why are they so reluctant to release the whole recording?
Maybe because the audio they released, you're still denying you said what's on the audio. Okay, let's ask you this question. Is Donald Trump,
it's
as
a
you
joke
say now,
that the media is going to selectively edit this, and this is the way this game is played. Politics is dirty, that's okay, I'm ready for it. It's not edited,
just to be clear. Is Donald Trump, as you say now, the best president of the 21st century?
Of the 21st century. Yes, he was.
Let me ask my question. Let me finish the question. Is Donald Trump, as you say now, the best president of the 21st century, who you say you want as an advisor and a mentor if you become president? Or is Trump, as you've said in the past in your books on Twitter, a, quote, sore loser who is a, quote, danger to democracy and who did, quote, downright abhorrent and egregious things on January the 6th?
Let's go through these one at a time, because they're each different types of claims deserving different scrutiny. On the January 6th and Mike Pence question, Vivek initially described a specific one-night legislative plan he claimed he would have pursued as vice president. Then, when pressed on the fact that the vice president doesn't have the constitutional authority to introduce legislation and that no single light bill of that scope was realistic, reframed his position as describing a longer window between the election and January 6th. Whether that constitutes a meaningful clarification or a walk-back claim is something you can judge directly by comparing his original Meet the Press statement to what he said in this interview, both of which are public record and worth watching side by side rather than taking either characterization at face value. On the Atlantic interview about 9/11s, this is the most concretely resolvable of the three claims because it hinges on whether audio exists and what it says. If the Atlantic did release the original recording and it matches their published quote as described here, that's a directly verifiable fact, not a matter of interpretation. And Vivek's shift from the quote is wrong to the quote is accurate but needs more context is a meaningfully different claim worth noting as a real shift in his defense, verifiable by listening to the actual released audio directly on the mask mandate tweet from 2020. Whether Vivek posted a specific tweet at a specific date calling a mask mandate proposal sensible is a directly checkable timestamp public record, and it's worth pulling up the actual archived tweet rather than accepting either collectorization secondhand on the voting record claim. Whether someone's first presidential vote was cast in 2004 versus 2020 and for which candidate is a matter of public voter record in most states. And this is exactly the kind of claim that's either true or false based on documented public record, not something reasonably disputed once the record is checked. What's notable about all four of these claims is that they're not really matters of political interpretation or contested historical analysis the way a lot of foreign policy debates are. They're specific, dated, documentable facts about what someone said or did, which makes them a good test case for whether a candidate's account of their own record holds up under direct scrutiny on the substantive foreign policy proposal discussed, splitting Russia's alliance with China through economic incentives and a Ukraine settlement. That's a real, debatable strategic question separate from the credibility issues. Mehdi's skepticism that Putin has a documented history of accepting concessions without reciprocating is a fair, evidence-based critique of the plan's central assumption, though it's also fair to note that testing whether economic incentives could genuinely widen cracks in the Russia-China relationship is a legitimate, if uncertain, foreign policy question that reasonable analysts disagree about. Here's what I'd leave you with. When a political interview centers on specific, dated, publicly documented claims rather than interpretive arguments, checking those claims directly against primary sources, tweets, voting records, released audio is straightforward and worth doing before accepting either side's framing, regardless of which candidate or which interviewer is involved. So tell me, do you think a candidate's handling of factual corrections about their own past statements says something meaningful about how they'd handle accountability in office? Or is that too high a bar to hold any politician to? Let me know in the comments, and if you want more of these breakdowns that check the primary record directly, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.